1.
Good evening. This is Congressman Peter Welch, and I want to welcome you to a telephone town hall meeting tonight to discuss student loan debt and the very rapid rising cost of college. If you have a question tonight or a comment, we're very interested in hearing your question or your comment. And all you have to do to participate is hit *3. Do that anytime during this call, and you'll be connected to a member of my staff who'll take your name and the town you're calling from, and then we'll do our best to take your comment live. Tonight's discussion is very timely. Right now, as we are sitting here, Vermont families are sitting all around Vermont about their kitchen tables trying to figure out how they're going to pay for college. A lot of parents are figuring out whether they can take out a second mortgage or refinance their home. Kids are trying to figure out how much money they can borrow. And it's getting so expensive, and the cost of borrowing is getting so expensive that it's making it increasingly difficult for people to have confidence that they're going to be able to afford to go to college. Remember, *3, press that at any time, and you'll get in line to share your comment or ask a question. The big question that we have in Congress is whether we are going to, on July 1, let the interest rates on the Stafford student loans double from 3.4% to 6.8%. My view, we cannot let this happen. You know, a lot of Vermont families look at me and they say, Peter, if the government is borrowing at 1.8%, why are you going to charge middle-class families 6.8%? And frankly, I don't have an answer because there's no answer to that. It's the worst thing that we could do. Now, *3, if you want to get in line to ask a question or make a comment. Two special participants tonight with us. And this is very special to me and really all Vermonters. Vermont Governor, former Representative, and U.S. Senator Bob Stafford was the author of the Stafford student loans. He worked with a Democratic senator from Rhode Island, Claiborne Pell. And together, Senator Stafford, a Republican, Senator Pell, a Democrat, did more to provide affordability to college kids going to college than anybody else. And they did it because they believed in it and they worked together. And with us tonight is Senator Stafford's granddaughter, who lives in Colchester, Lena Kunkel. And she's going to say a few words of her own about her experience. Lena, would you like to introduce yourself and give us your observations and thoughts about your grandfather?
Yes, I'd love to. Thanks for having me. So my first, point was, I myself had a Stafford loan, and it allowed me the chance to go to college. I went to UVM, and I got my degree. And when I was first graduated and first working, my Stafford loan was, a reasonable bill for me to try and pay off, while I was getting started. And, because of the loan and because of my education, I now have a career, and I can be, a contributing member of society, with mortgage payments and taxes on other things. So, my Stafford loan was vital, to what I've become in the career that I have. And, I love my job, and, having a house is important, and just being a member that's feeding to this economy. And the other thing I wanted to say was that, as Robert Stafford's granddaughter, I know how important this is, this law and loans were to him. And, this is his legacy. And, we can't, I know he would fight this, and want things to be accessible. That was his intention of developing this, was accessibility. And, he was a compromiser, and he got things done, for what was right. And it would be, it would really be a shame if these interest rates increased.
Well, Elena, thanks so much. And that's just an amazing connection. You and your grandfather, and you then, like millions of other American students, using the Stafford loan to help you get started. And by the way, you make a point that I find very important. You were able to graduate. You had debt, you're paying it off, but you still were able to get a job and you had enough room that you could start making purchases that young adults do. And that, of course, helps other people get jobs and keeps the economy going.
Right.
We have kids getting out now with this huge debt. They can't afford a car, they can't afford a refrigerator, and they have to move in with their parents in some cases, and it's bad for the economy. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Remember, *3 if you want to make a comment or ask a question. And before we go to questions, though, we've got Don Vickers. And Don Vickers was the president and CEO of the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation that is a tremendous help to Vermont students and has been. Don has worked there since 1971 and probably knows more about student financial aid in need than literally anybody in Vermont and maybe anybody in the country. Don, thank you for participating. You want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Congressman Welch. I appreciate the opportunity to participate. I mean, this is a very important topic. I mean, right now we're seeing two different challenges for Vermont families. We're seeing families who have a son or daughter entering college this fall, and the economy is not good. There's been no increases in grant scholarship aid, but educational charges are going up. And the main avenue of financing is debt financing. And it's very scary because of what people are reading in the paper and the amount of debt they have to assume. And so we're spending a lot of time counseling those families. And also, as you mentioned earlier, the students who graduated in this economy are finding themselves now having to look at making loan payments and large loan payments, and maybe in some cases not having a job, in some cases having a job that doesn't pay enough for them to make those payments. And so we spend a lot of time counseling those families on repayment options. So we witness every day the struggles being faced by Vermont families, and I really appreciate the work you have done to fight this increase in the interest rate, because there's no reason in today's market that we should be doubling the interest rate on student loans.
Yeah, you know, Don, one question I get a lot, thank you very much. The Stafford loans right now are 3.54%, but a lot of parents have loans that are not Stafford loans that they've taken out to help their kids, and those are sometimes 6, 7, or even 8%. And they are very frustrated they can't refinance at the lower rate. I wonder if you could address that, because that we need to give answers to people who are in that situation.
Yeah, there's three loan programs. There's the subsidized Stafford program, which is the 3.4% interest rate you referred to, and that goes to students who show the student is the borrower with financial need. And then there's two others, the unsub Stafford loan, which students can borrow. And
unsubsidized.
Unsubsidized, and that is at 6.8%. And then there is the Parent Plus loan, which is at 7.9%, which is a really high loan. And a lot of parents are forced to borrow that because they can't borrow enough under the Stafford loan program. And there is no way by law they can refinance those loans. One of the things we have done is we have an alternative non-federal loan program that's credit-based that actually offers families lower rates, fixed rates for a longer period of time. And we were able to provide Vermonters with about $23 million worth of loans last year. So it's a real challenge. At the same time, we want to make sure people borrow, don't overborrow, know what the commitment is, and a way to keep that debt down. And we're trying to encourage families who borrow to try to pay at least the interest as a minimum while the student's in school, if not make some principal payments. Because when you don't pay the interest, when you graduate, the debt is much larger, and that's one of the problems we're seeing out there today.
Mm-hmm. And, one question some people ask is, what's the default rate? And my understanding is it's pretty low in Vermont. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the national default rate, I believe, is about 8%, and our rate is running about 3.2%. And that has a lot to do with the counseling and support that you can provide to families. One of the things we're proud of is I've had parents tell me and students that, if I can't make a payment, I'm not afraid to call VSAC, and that's contrary to anything that when you can't make a debt payment, you don't want to talk to the creditor. But we've had a lot of families do that, and we're able to help them out by having them skip a payment or spreading out payments or working out a payment program. And that's a service we've been able to provide, and that's really important.
Well, good. We've got a question. By the way, anyone on the line, hit *3, and you can ask a question or make a comment. We have a question from Jim in Shelburne with a question about principal on loans. Jim?
Yes, hopefully you can hear me well enough. Question I have is when I pay my loans back, my Parent Plus loans back, and I pay an added amount, what ends up being applied against the payment is a future payment. So some of my loans show I paid through 2014, rather than just applying the excessive amount to the balance itself. So what I'm ending up doing is I'm not getting the realization, like if I'm paying a mortgage payment and I throw an extra $100 on it, it actually reduces the principal 100% by the $100. The student loans don't do that. And also, I had to take a student loan out this fall for my son, and the rate was 8.5%, where my son had a 3% plus loan.
Well, maybe I did not know that. Don, can you address that? By the way, to anybody on the line, if you have a question about various loan options, Don Vickers is here, and he can help out. So, Don, do you have an answer for Jim's question?
Yeah, I had a little trouble hearing Jim, Jim, I'm going to tell you that I would have you give VSAC a call tomorrow. I'm going to give you the best shot at this I can, because it's a phenomenon that happens with interest. So if I understand your question, is you're paying more than the payment on your loan in a given month, and what's happening, it's going to next month's principal payment. Eventually, and it's not going against next month's interest payment and not going against the principal payment, which when you do a mortgage, you could send it an extra $100 and say apply it to principal. In the end, it will do the same thing. But the way it is, it takes down next month's principal interest payment. So what happens is it eventually is going to bring down your principal. It's a complicated theory about interest. And the folks at VSAC would be glad to sit down with you and explain that, because we do get a lot of questions about that.
Okay, thank you. And again, to everyone on the line, hit *3 and you can ask a question or make a comment. And we have a question from Jim in Stowe. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. My feeling is that I'm wondering, my comment is I'm kind of wondering why it's taking so long for us to pass this as a Congress. Because, this is something these kids really need, and it's really, tough if you were to go ahead and double the interest rate, even though, a lot of people might think 6% is next to nothing, but 3% is a lot, because you've got passbook savings at 2% and lower than that. And if you're really lucky enough to get a favorable loan from a bank for some type of student situation, you'll end up paying somewhere around 9%. And the fact of the matter is, we stood up and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and give you this interest rate. Go ahead, secure the loans, and had the banks loan the money on that, and that was the deal. And we should be able to stand up for these poor kids, because they had enough of a burden to support the economy and go ahead and get their education, and they're going to support it even more and be really good providers for society. And I took advantage of it, and actually my interest was deferred, because as soon as when I was a couple years into college, I got drafted, and I served during the Vietnam era, and my interest payments were deferred, and payments on the loans were deferred till I got out of the service, and it was just a godsend for me.
Oh, that's great. Great.
Kids as much as we can.
Well, thank you very much. If Bob Stafford were here and his colleagues, we wouldn't be in this fix. Things have changed. That's the unfortunate thing. There's a significant number of members of the House, anyway, who focus only on one thing, and that's cutting the budget. And it's not doing it necessarily in a balanced way, or figuring out whether the Pentagon should be included in cuts, whether we ought to include taxes so we can also make a contribution to deficit reduction with some revenues. And anything that cuts is considered to be good. And, of course, traditionally in our country, we've always had a commitment to policies that help the middle class, help folks who want to get into the middle class have a way to get there, help people who are in the middle class have a way to stay there. And student loans, by the way, are loans. It's not like it's a grant. you've got to pay that back just like you did. And the initial legislation in the budget in the House, the so-called Ryan budget, basically wiped out the Stafford loans altogether. And there was really a huge backlash by, in my view, parents who were Republicans and Democrats and were doing the math and trying to figure out how their kids were going to be able to go to college. So now at least there's a, quote, agreement that we have to keep the interest rates low, but there's an unwillingness to come up with a way to pay for it. And that's what's different from the days when Robert Stafford was here, when he'd walk across the aisle and sit down with Senator Pell. And the question of how to pay for things, those are hard questions. But you know what? If you're serious, if you've got a seriousness of purpose, and that is you're going to help kids, then you find a way to do it. And we certainly could do it. So, and by the way, the other thing that's so important, people in public service or in the military, they got forgiveness on their loan. They were doing public service like you were. And we kept that in the legislation a few years ago, and in the recent budget, that's been eliminated. So we have a need for teachers. They don't get paid a lot, especially at the beginning. We have a need for people doing public service. They don't get paid much. And if we can forgive their loans to make it possible for them to do work that needs to be done, we should. But we've eliminated that. So this is the world we're in, and but we got to keep at it. And I think Lena's comments are the most inspiring to me. Now, hit *3 if you want to make a comment, you want to ask a question, you want to get specific information. We've got a question from Chelsea in Montpelier. Go ahead, Chelsea.
Hi. I was just going to share a couple of stories. The first one's mine, and it was a pretty good story. I paid off my loans, but it took leaving college early, working over 40 hours a week.
Chelsea, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second just to announce that we just got our 5,700th participant. I mean, this is a big issue, Chelsea, for Vermonters. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, so I was able to pay mine off, but I'm not working over 40 hours a week anymore, and it took help from family. My fiance has a debt load of over $30,000, and it's at the 7% rate. And neither of us are able to work full time, just because we haven't found those jobs. And we sat down, and he's not required to make payments because he doesn't make enough money. But we thought we better start working on this. We sat down together. We budgeted out how much we could put toward it every month. We felt pretty good about it. 5 months in, we were like, all right, let's look and see if we've knocked some off. I was thinking we'd at least have knocked off a couple $1,000s because we really we worked on it. And instead, it had gone up. So that was really discouraging.
Well, how much debt do you have, if I can ask?
$30,000. I think $36,000.
Well,
which I think isn't much compared to what I've heard from others.
Well, no, it's true. You know, when I just walked around the University of Vermont the other day, just randomly, and talked to students, and the amount of debt went from $15,000 to $80,000. And the other thing is that every student I spoke to had a job, and they were working between 10 and in some cases 30 and 40 hours a week. So this is tough. You know, I worked when I was in college, but it was like 15 hours a week, and it was really just for my spending money. Kids now, they literally can't survive unless they have jobs, and that makes it tough, obviously, to focus on all your courses. So thank you. We've got a question from Rosemary in Granville. Rosemary, go ahead.
Hi, this is Graniteville, Barrytown.
Okay. Well, you go ahead.
My question was, my granddaughter wanted to go to college last fall. Very good, student, but there was $4,000 short. Her parents cannot borrow money to go to college because, they are working poor. And this year, she went to community college and took classes online. She took 10 classes. Her GPA is 3.95, And now she's saying to go next year, she's going to have to take a Sally Mae loan. How expensive is that?
Well, maybe, we've got Mr. Vickers here. Don, can you answer her question about that, the Sally Mae loan? Boy, she sounds like a wonderful person, by the way.
Yeah, and that's great what she's done. And a lot of students are opting to go to the community college as a way to keep the costs of going to school down. I'm a little cautionary about a Sally Mae loan. And the reason I say that, if it's a Sally Mae loan, it's what we call a non-federal loan. And a lot of people who offer non-federal loans, they advertise rates that look low, but then when you actually get the loan, it's a larger rate. And so what I would suggest is give us a call at VSAC and ask about, if she has to take out, ask about the Advantage loan. And somebody will also walk through your granddaughter's financial aid package and find out what all the components are and how much of it is loan. And then they will be able to tell her the difference between a Sally Mae loan and any other loan, because it's very important that she get a decent rate and what the repayment conditions are. And when it comes to non-federal loans, a lot of counseling is necessary, and that would be the best route. So give us a call tomorrow.
I think what might be helpful to folks on the line would be if you could give them a number that they could call and perhaps a website they could go to.
The number is 1-800-642-3177. Again, 1-800-642-3177. It's a toll-free line. And you can go on our website at vsac.org. And there's a host of information on there about loans. There's calculators on there. But in this particular case, I think it's important that this young woman give us a call at VSAC and talk to one of our counselors.
And I just want to say to the 7,200 Vermonters that are on the line now, VSAC is there. You'll get a live person to answer your questions. These are tough family financial decisions, and you can get help, and it doesn't cost you anything to talk to the really, really good people, the Vermonters at VSAC. We've got a question now from Deb in Montpelier. Deb, go ahead.
Okay, what I was wondering was what you brought up earlier, which was that when people would come back from the military or they would get jobs as teachers, that it would make a big difference in their loan repayments, sometimes, just wiping them out. And right. I don't understand why we stopped doing that, because we need teachers. And, obviously anybody who's been in the military would obviously deserve that. And so I was wondering, what it was that stopped that from happening.
Well,
or why we can't reinstitute it again.
Well, Deb, I'm in total agreement with you. A confident country that wants to prosper knows that it has to educate young people. You just have to do that. And traditionally we have. But the budget politics here in Congress, I regret to say, don't agree. So up until this year, we actually did have that opportunity for loan forgiveness for people doing public service jobs like teachers. So that was taken away in the recent so-called Ryan budget. And I think that's a grave mistake. I agree with you about that. Now, as far as veterans, we have made bipartisan progress there. We've said to returning veterans that, hey, let's do a GI Bill type of situation. And they can get their tuition paid up to the cost of the tuition in the public institution in that state. And in Vermont, many of our private institutions like Middlebury in the University of Vermont have said they'll make up the difference if they have an eligible veteran going to their school. So we are providing some significant help, and I'm glad we are, to the veterans. But I think we should be, as you say, Deb, providing that help to folks who are doing really important public service work. We've got another hit *3 if you want to make a comment, ask a question of Mr. Vickers. Make a comment. We've got Lena on here, Senator Stafford's granddaughter. We do have a question from Chris in East Dover. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. My question is pretty simple, and I guess my concern is that in the debate over the student loans, one of the things that's being lost is the exponential cost of education in this country. I graduated from college back in 1993. Was lucky enough to go to Brown University. I did not come from wealthy parents. I was provided some student loans, and luckily my father worked for Harvard University, and they offered interest-free student loans for the children of people that worked there. But the cost of Brown University at the time I went was something about, with tuition and room and board, was $25,000. I think it's north of $50,000 now.
Right.
And it just seems to me like that's grown far beyond the cost of living. And these are nonprofit institutions with huge endowments, and it seems crazy to me that the cost has risen so much. I don't know how they expect people of ordinary means to go to, I'm talking primarily about private institutions, but I know here in Vermont, the University of Vermont's not any bargain either.
Well, I happen to agree with you. I think that it's very important to have low-cost loans that are available to help. It's important to have grants. But we have to deal with the cost side, and that's where we have to be asking our educational administrators to be addressing this escalation in tuition. Last year, tuition in private universities went up almost 9%. And as you mentioned, it's higher than inflation, higher than wages, higher than profits. I mean, you can't keep up with that. It actually went up faster than healthcare. So part of our approach here has to include engaging the education administration community to examine the business model, because this isn't sustainable. So I agree with you. It's a very important component of it. So thanks for bringing up that very important point. Hit *3 if you want to make a comment or ask a question. Kathy in West Rutland has a question. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi there. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids that I put through college. I have parent loans. I don't have a problem with my parent loans. That's my responsibility. But I also have a son that lives in Rutland, Vermont. He's a school teacher. He's a great school teacher. He earns $25,000 a year. He's $20,000 in debt. How is he, as a young person with a mortgage, a baby, a wife, how is he supposed to do this? Plus, in the teaching industry, he's supposed to start working for his master's degree. This is ridiculous. There's no way that he can get out from under what he's already gotten into.
Boy, is that a powerful story. I mean, that's what Lena was talking about when we initially began. She got out with some debt, but it was when it wasn't as expensive to go to school. And she was able, she said, to make some of those purchases that when you're starting out in life you have to do. The loan forgiveness program that had existed might have been helpful. John, I don't know if you have anything that you can add that might be helpful, or remind Kathy of the telephone number that her child can call for a little help.
Sure. There is a possibility here that might help, but it's not a perfect solution, and I, as one, have concerns about the solution, but it is available. It's called income-based repayment, okay? And what it means is when they look at the amount of your debt and what your income is, you don't pay over a certain percentage of your income in your loan